Welcome to the TRICHOMES Weekly Roll Up. This week in cannabis, in the United States, cannabis becomes a $6.2 billion crop, coming in above cotton based on wholesale crop values. And researchers have concluded there is no link between legalization, suicide, and/or depression. Next, the DEA has called for new cannabis cultivators to supply the federal government funded research studies. Additionally, a recent study was published stating that cannabis previously supplied from Ole Miss is more similar to hemp than what can be found in dispensaries today. And last up, a new report from the US Congressional Research Service has found that President Biden can provide amnesty to anyone for cannabis related crimes. And now, here are your hosts, John Bond and Jarod Duggins.
Hey, looks like we're live. How are you doing, John?
Indeed. Absolutely, Jarod. How you doing?
I'm doing great. And thank you for whoever else has joined us for the first TRICHOMES Weekly Roll Up. Joined here by the host John Bond, joining us from Dutchy. And we're conducting this right now at TRICHOMES. We're building out a production studio. This is our first live show, so we want to make sure everything technically is going well. And there's going to be a comment section if you're watching on YouTube. Make sure if audio is not good or there's any difficulties, you let us know, because this is the first show of many. We are tuned in here at 2 p.m. PST right now, but every Friday from now on, we will be tuning in at 12 noon PST. So remember to mark your calendars for that. Let's see. That's it. We are building out a production studio, so that's the fun stuff that we're looking forward to over here. But as of now, this is the set, and I am, like I said, joined by John Bond from Dutchy. John, please let us know a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. I feel like I need one of those things that you speak into to look more official on the camera. But absolutely stoked to be here. I'm really excited about the podcast, and there's just so many facets of our industry that I'm super intrigued by. And so I'm John Bond, JB for short. I'm the director of partnerships at Dutchy, and I've been working in cannabis for about 5 years now, everywhere from the cultivation side up through now, obviously, the cannabis technology piece. So just happy to be here and continuing to engage with the industry that we love so much,
Awesome. And thanks again for being here on this. It's there's a lot going on right now in our industry, and there's some movers and shakers. There's some people who are getting left by the wayside, and you know what? Really, whether you're a day oneer or this is your first day in the industry, you're part of what's happening right now in cannabis, and that's really our story. Is cannabis, TRICHOMES. So we're here to talk about it, and being Dutchy, hey. You guys have a big say on this. You're intertwined in a lot of sales that are going on. You're part of the culture, part of the vibe of the industry right now, and really, I would say that you're a proud point of the industry right now. It's hey, look at us. We're becoming something, and hey, it's companies like Dutchy, Weed Maps. These other companies are getting billion-dollar valuations that are putting it there. So
man, with the endemic space of cannabis, right, or the outside world, right, there's really no greater compliment than to be called, the pride point of the industry. And honestly, it's not just Dutchy, right? I mean, there's so many companies that are pushing things forward right now, and we're just super happy to be a part of it. And realistically, we know the challenges that exist within the space, and it's like, if all of us can work together to help make it easier to do business, the lengths of which we can go are incredible. And so we're just, happy to be here, and obviously outstanding opportunity as we get into the new year in 2022 to really continue to change the game and rewrite the script of what people think are possible, as an entire space.
For sure. And speaking of what people think are possible, I mean, that could bring us right into that first headline. U.S. agriculture has us cannabis crop coming in as the 5th largest crop, just above cotton at 6.2 billion as a national crop on the wholesale value.
And I think, the really intriguing part about that, and again, take this with a grain of salt, because I don't think I've ever read anything completely, which is why I'd be a terrible attorney. But, that's actually just based on the 11 recreational adult use markets that's actually accounting for. So the medical markets in itself don't play into that national crop piece there. And so I think that's super exciting, and nothing's more indicative of the opportunity of growth that exists here than the fact that that's literally 11 of the 39 cannabis markets that exist, which is wild.
Right. I think the only time it included medical was when there's actually recreational in the state, so that there's a different licensing program. I'm not sure exactly, but it did. I think it's just recreational, which
Totally.
What was it? It was like 52 Olympic pools that it could fill up with cannabis. It's
a lot of weed. It's a lot of weed, man. You know, it's interesting. And there's differences. I was actually in Canada. I was in Toronto all week this week for a conference. And obviously the recreational, it's federally legal up there. And, you know, there's so many like similarities, but differences at the same time. And like, you see things like companies like FedEx, who you would never think that we're going to get near cannabis, publicly putting out things like, we'll ship your cannabis for you. Right. And it's like, that's just so cool to see that, like, that's the direction that things are headed there. And I think it's only getting better tomorrow than it was today.
Definitely. Definitely see a bunch of stuff coming in. And, you know, it's the good and the bad, right? We've talked before offline. We talked many a times. You know, I think we're both of the volition that cannabis isn't a cure-all, you know, but within that, as a recreational, you know, versus all the other alcohol, tobacco, all that kind of stuff. It's like, hey, the side effects, the list. Well, right now we're learning more about the list, the research, the development, that kind of stuff is coming out. But that's really, again, what our job is as the people who are representing the industry and working in it right now. It's our job to help that narrative come to light. And really, you know, whether it's the stonerisms that you're going to forget everything, or you know, or that you're super lackadaisical or whatnot, you know, one of those things that was linked to cannabis use and overall was depression and suicide possibly. But again, one of the headlines we're talking about is researchers have concluded, and you know, right now off the top of my head, I can't remember which report that is. I'm feeling unprepared. But there's no link between actual recreational legalization and suicide or depression in the states where it's happened.
Totally. And you know, it's interesting. It's like, we're in this position where we've obviously gone through the pandemic, and that's not been anything like unlike anything that any of us have ever seen in our lifetime, and hopefully that we'll never see again. Right. And it's like, you know, to come out of something like the opioid epidemic, right, and thinking about just the havoc that wreaked on the entire world, right? And it's like, people are so distrusting, and for good reason, of a lot of those types of things. We have an opportunity here to really help push some things forward that are truly helpful for individuals, right? Like you said, it's like, you know, prior to like 2008, they were treating depression with OxyContin, right? And it's like, we all know how that ended up. And there's just such a non-likelihood, you know, for that to happen with cannabis because of the nature of the plant and the way that everyone's approaching, I think, the grassroots piece of it. And it's like, you know, there's a lot of things in the world that we're like, you know, we're very lucky to be a part of. And I think nothing's been highlighted in that capacity like it has been in the last year. Right. And it's, when I think about like the opportunity, what represents of like truly impacting, not just on a financial level, but like on an overall, you know, mental, physical health level with everything. There's just like, what else would you rather be doing? Right. And that's another way I've always looked at it.
Exactly.
Totally.
Feeling lucky over here. You know, I'm watching over here and I see some comments coming in, and being the first time, we're going to figure out how we do this in order and that kind of stuff. But since it's just one of the probably few viewers that are with us right at the moment, Ron Valley was talking about hemp cloth being part of, you know, that agricultural and whatnot. That's definitely part of the cannabis industry and whole, you know,
I mean,
textiles.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Hemp cloth, you know, there's been planes that have been built out of hemp. There's concrete. You know, what's crazy is, and without getting too far off into the woods, you know, on day one, a lot of people believe that the prohibition of cannabis was directly correlated with how many industries it would have disrupted as far as being a useful substance, right? Because if you think about the textile industry, the steel and manufacturing industrial industry, it's like all of those things were all funded by very big business that in the 30s, people had no way of like validating like, oh, is this incorrect? Is this correct? Is this the right thing? Is it the wrong thing? And you know, when you see something that's that disruptive, especially in a time before anything was digital, it's like, that was what kept that away, right? The reefer madness and all these things that we all read about. I mean, that was like there's a direct correlation there, and it's insane.
Absolutely. And, that's something that we'll have to get into. And maybe we'll even have a special episode about that and bring in, I don't know, we've got historians around us. We've got fact checkers. Let's bring in some people and really talk about some of those misnomers and out and
Absolutely.
out lies that have set this back so far and really created one of the largest atrocities towards people, on the medical level. Hey, recreationally, guess what? We could have all been smoking at our own peril the whole time. But when it comes down to medical patients and people like Charlotte Figge, who upped the ante and moved this through the finish line for us and really started to get things rolling. Yeah, dude, can't forget that.
And then folks like Colton Turner, who
Exactly.
Colton's Cure. I mean, that's like, he's now 21. I had the opportunity to meet Colton at a conference in Missouri, and his mom Wendy is also an outstanding human, and Colton is a shining example of somebody that really pushed that envelope and is now moving forward and benefiting so many people for folks. And it's like, that's just like such a big deal, right? I mean, I just don't know that there are people that are making that big of singular impact on that side of it.
Oh yeah, and that's it. We have that innate responsibility. This is our time in history. This is cannabis's time in history, and ultimately, hey, again, we said at the beginning, it's not a cure-all. It's not everybody's best friend. Some people, it's not just about finding the right strain. It might not be the right thing for you. But we're here to say that too, right? We're also here to get it right so that people aren't feeling lonely about it, or else, sticking with the stigma and feeling bad about the use anymore either.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, let's see, and this gets into the studies. Actually, it's funny enough. That was kind of a natural parlay there. The DEA has just recently called for new cannabis cultivators to they up the ante. Obviously, the RFP, or request for proposal, has been out for a while federally for cultivators to make themselves known, which I thought was kind of ironic. It's like, hi, we're the federal government. We don't believe in medical cannabis, but would you please tell us where your facility is?
Yeah, I was like, well, tell us where your address is at.
We won't touch anything, we promise.
Yeah, sure.
But that's because essentially we're getting enough eyes in there and enough transparency that people are figuring out that Ole Miss was basically growing hemp cloth for studies. And, whether they were growing and had powdery mildew or was grown like outdoor hemp or wild hemp or that kind of thing, we don't know any of the context to what they were growing over the last little bit, except for that now the studies on, cannabis back in the 80s and 90s was so much less potent than today. Well, if it came from Mississippi, you were really spot on. But outside of that, 80s, 90s, I was smoking roadkill skunk that was murdering people. Family, the parents would walk into the room and be like, shut the window, there's a skunk outside. It's like,
Yeah.
But
absolutely. Yeah, and it's wild because you think about all of that, and like I remember I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in Kansas, right? And there's a dramatic difference between underground ditchweed that you get in Kansas and the unbelievable products you can pull off a shelf in any of the states that have a cannabis program. And some people, since the beginning of time, right? People have argued their weed sucks, my weed's better than their weed. That's like the drug dealer. At the end of the day, that's like the MO. And fortunately enough, at least with us in our position as Dutchy, we get to work with all of the best cannabis companies in the world, and it's the most exciting thing ever. And so I've tried a lot of different types of cannabis, been in thousands of dispensaries. And I can tell you, it's like, you think about that on a macro, it's like, what else could you ask for out of an emerging industry to have such a wide variety and subset of things that are just impressive products that it's all about the matter of time, right? The weed's better today than it was in the 80s because there's more people thinking critically about how can I grow the best weed possible and what are the changes that I can make from a variable side of things that are going to improve what I'm doing here. And it's not that there's not a ton of smart people back then thinking about it. It was just in a much more concentrated it's come out of the back room in that sense. Mm-hmm. And so now you've got people that are not afraid to sit there on blog posts rest his soul, Frenchie Cannoli, the master Hashishin, right? He was adamant about letting his trade secrets become that of the world. He would spend hours on YouTube educating folks. And it's that kind of stuff is what pushes it forward and breeds those new ideas and those new generations of folks to come out with great things, which ultimately produces better products. It's just like technology or anything else. The more that you have putting minds on it, the more likely we are that it's going to dramatically improve stuff. You know what I mean? And so here we are today. It's not your grandpa's weed anymore, right? We've got a ton of people making things happen. And so that's just like, it's incredible.
Yeah. Well, and from madamecanole, who's still continuing on and posting some of her stuff and that kind of thing, I was lucky enough to not once, and not because I failed, but twice take his Lost Art of Hashishin class when I was out in LA. And, I wasn't as close to, I wasn't as close to Frenchie as a lot of people were, because he was, it was just part of the cloth up in Northern California and that kind of stuff. But I grew to know him and love him prior to even taking the classes because of his dedication and that type of thing. And then taking the courses and learning through that thick French accent and doing all that kind of stuff. I mean, his appreciation for it definitely needs to be carried on and forward. And really a lot of that type of technique, now not all of it, not the hashish, and it's still cold water extract and that kind of stuff is included in a lot of the techniques that are out today, whether it be live rosin or hash as we know it and that kind of stuff. So
yeah, I mean, it's just like anything, just iteration, right? It's like people are building upon good ideas, and that's how societies have been built, right? It's like, at some point someone created fire and we're like, wow, with fire we can create energy, and with energy and warmth we can create a community. And then all of a sudden, it's like it's the continued compounding of good ideas and learning the bad ones as well too, right? Is like what constantly pushes things forward and challenges stuff. And it's like, that's an amazing thing to watch happen in such a concentrated period of time. I mean, the amount of difference that exists today than when I got into the cannabis space, 6 years ago is absurd. And I've only aged 25 years in the last 6 years, but it's been kind of one of those things where it's like, it blows my mind, and it's only getting better. And I'm just like, anyways, nerding out about how lucky I am to be a part of it,
Oh, it's awesome. It really is. And I mean, ultimately it's still, like you said, taking all these traditions and linking them up with new studies. As we're discussing, the studies out there still bad mouthing cannabis or doing that and doing whatever. It's the marijuana madness, if you will. Really it's the anecdotal science, the people who have been treating certain things that really needs to match up with today's research and science going forward, to start going down those paths and finding out if it's really a cure for what the people are looking for or not, or if there's something better.
It's becoming an inarguable point though, because before it was like reefer madness, right? And it's like, okay, cool, like show me something that's not anecdotal that validates any of these things that are being said. And as we've gotten into the age of information access and instant information access, it becomes harder and harder to draw that hard line in the sand to say, this is a demon plant and it's doing this and it's the gateway drug, and people that smoke marijuana are likely to move into other things. And it's like, that you can't substantiate that with any sort of data. And the more that you got like institutions like Stanford that are doing credible studies on cannabis now, how do you point at that and say that there wasn't due diligence or the scientific method or any type of educational backing that followed that? You can't say that anymore. Whereas like 30 years ago, totally different story. And so it's like the people that are going to say, what I've noticed is like, there's always going to be negativity towards anything. And especially in today's day and age, people feel very comfortable with being negative about things, especially those of which they're unfamiliar. And so, the more we can normalize that, the less those voices are loud or even change their mind. Right. Like, and I use my parents as a perfect example, who people that were opposed to cannabis, but through my involvement with it prior to, I should say, post working in cannabis, high school, not a fan. Right. But since I worked in cannabis, they've taken a more like, neutral lens to understanding it. And like that to me is just such a cool thing. A kid from Kansas whose parents live there still. Right. And it's like, for them to get friendly with cannabis, I think, that says a lot, and that's generationally and as well as like geographically too. I mean, depending on where you're at in the country, different places have more or different levels of comfortability with it than others.
Oh yeah. Well, and same thing with my parents. We've always lived in California, but typically conservative parents. And then I was the one that got in trouble, lots of trouble, more trouble than that with cannabis. And, and so at one point it was not so much cannabis, but what was happening because of the laws and that kind of stuff. And we'll journey into it later in this series. But I was on federal probation, prescribed Marinol, and I couldn't possess cannabis. And then I did 6 months for a probation violation.
And saying it out loud makes it sound so much more ridiculous. Like, and makes you shit, shows you how ridiculous it really is. Right.
Right.
It's like, come on.
And that's it. It's right now, over the last 20 years, like you said, as it's become more prevalent, the federal courts wouldn't even recognize an argument for medical cannabis, right? You said medical cannabis, strike that from the rule, or strike that from the law, whatever. It's not allowed in there. But today, they're hearing arguments, they're seeing the research, there is a medical value. There are multiple medical values that are coming out, research-based, patents granted, that type of thing. And now you've still got people in prison and getting in trouble for something there's no medical value. And that's really kind of the last story for the week that we had to cover. And it came out kind of, I think we reported on it today, maybe yesterday it came out. But a new report says it's a new report from the US Congressional Research Service has found that President Biden can provide amnesty to anyone for cannabis-related crimes. And he's not.
Absolutely. And honestly, shout out to the organizations that are really pushing the ball forward there. You got organizations like 40 Tons and the Last Prisoner Project, and these groups are doing unbelievable amounts of work to make that happen. And it's like, to your point, right? The 40,000 folks that are in prison right now for nonviolent cannabis crimes, when the billions of dollars that are being made on that every year, it's an absolute travesty. And so, like, the more that people are aware of that and continue to like vocalize that, it's a matter of time. Like you said, that's like the first step. And so it's fortunately you've got groups like 40 Tons and Last Prisoner that are pushing it forward, right? But then it's not just, it can't be singularly like those groups, right? It has to be a group of people that are all believing in that and staying focused on the mission there. And I know we'll get there, right? But it's not going to happen. They can't ignore everybody forever. It's like it's getting louder. The mediums are firing off more. It's great to see the progress of that and obviously contributing to that however we all can, right? Is I feel like our responsibility is folks that feel fortunate enough to work in this industry, right? Like, there's a lot of folks like, you got the Corvain Coopers of the world, the Dante Westmorelands of the world that, spent, yourself included, Jarod, spent time, right? And it's like, people's lives were changed forever because of a misconception and a misappropriation of what this plant can do and like the severity and just really it all circles back to money and control. And it's like, as we continue to move forward to break those molds is like, that's the most important thing we're doing here. Yes, do we want to create easier access to cannabis for everyone? Without a doubt. But let's focus on the important stuff first. You know what I mean?
Well, and as much as the pandemic fast forwarded the cannabis industry and made us, starting in San Francisco, made us the essential workers and really helped fast forward the industry. It's also made it as to where it kind of got out in front of itself a little bit, and we've got to make sure that get those horses back out in front of the cart and that the old laws keep up with the new laws, because there's people that are going to get caught in the middle. And essentially, unless President Biden, with the stroke of a pen, grants amnesty or decriminalizes or something, we're going to be sitting on this for a while, unfortunately.
But but I'll tell you what, though, it's not like people are forgetting that that's right there. And I guarantee, it's on us as societally to continue to make that voice heard, noise and can like as much noise as possible, because that's really what it is. It's like, it's not taking the, absolutely. We'll work on it. Right now. No, you know what I mean? And that's a communal effort there for sure.
Well, and it's people like yourself joining us to talk about it. We try to put out the news and help the community understand what's going on, with these little nuances and little movements going forward. But like you said, it takes this conversation happening and other people joining it, or else it's going to fall on deaf ears just because there's not enough reason for them to do anything.
Totally. Couldn't agree more, man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's it for the topic coverage here. And I know we're kind of going informally or whatever, but this first roundup here, that's it. Those are kind of the 5 major headlines for the week.
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, obviously I know this is kind of our beta podcast here, but obviously we're really excited about the opportunity to bring, the conversation to the masses. And I know we all know, and I personally, you do as well, a lot of folks in the space. And so really our goal of the show is to have folks that are leaders in the cannabis space on every week and kind of drill through topics there. So if you have any interest at all, please reach out to Jarod or myself. I know I've got a few in mind that we'd love to have on here soon. Also totally open to topics that folks want to have covered as well too. We're here to talk about the fun stuff, the not fun stuff, and then, enjoy ourselves a little bit, man. So I'm with it. As soon as I can figure out how we can smoke in this office without getting caught or in trouble, have someone come and beat me over the head, I'll be all right. But absolutely, man, it's going to be a good time.
Nice. Yeah, we're in the new production studio in that facility. We're going to be putting carbon filters. So we'll put the fan outside of the box and we'll be filtering the air out just because, right now we currently have a couple other people in the building as well. And I'm not sure if they'll like it.
Fair enough. I guess we got to keep everyone happy, but absolutely, man.
Right on. Well, hey, John, thank you very much. Like you said, reach out podcasts@trichomes.com for show ideas, or if you want to get on the show, again, just podcasts@trichomes.com, spelled out that way directly. Always, when you're watching these things, jump in the comments if you have anything to any questions on what we're talking about or anything to add to the week, the roll up, and otherwise, 12 o'clock next Friday, we'll see you. And absolutely. Bond. Mr. Bond, thank you very much again for joining us.
Absolutely, man. It's great to be here. I was stoked to catch everybody next week.
Perfect. Well, happy Friday. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon.